Gotcha.
Okay. Cool. Welcome back to the Curious Cult Show. I am your host, Nick Haralambis, and today I'm lucky to talk to someone who I've known for a while, almost invested in one of my previous businesses, has done a lot of stuff. Bob, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Nick. It's great to be here. Appreciate it.
Cool, man. So before we kick off, like I ask every one of my guests, please introduce yourself and tell us why we should be listening to you.
Well, we're listening to me because we're listening to you, but thank you. Very short intro. I was incredibly lucky to have a career in professional sport, which started very early on. I was a student at Stellenbosch University as an 18, 19-year-old and got into professional sport as rugby became a vocation, which it wasn't before I got to the university. And then I spent 12 years, 13 years of my life playing sport in various guises around the world, and played internationally for South Africa, which was a great privilege. And I think it put me onto sort of I would say what's become a modern day entrepreneurial journey, because I got involved in businesses from very early on, and had a whole number of investments and co-investments with people on that journey. And then when sport finished for me, I realized I wanted to go back into that space. I did a short stint in corporate in a more formal role to learn a little bit about how to dot the I's and cross the T's in a corporate environment, while I was managing a small portfolio of my own little investments. I exited those and joined a family office in the UK 4.5 years ago now, or almost 5 years ago. And I've been there ever since. That family office has subsequently bought what I regard as one of the best venture capital managers in South and Southern Africa, called Knife Capital. So I'm a partner there, and I'm a venture partner at the family office.
Brilliant. That was very succinct, but very detailed. Nice. And I couldn't agree with you more on Knife Capital. I've actually never formally worked with the team, but admire everything they've done. So yeah, I think you're in a great place. So to kick things off, can you remember the first difficult thing that you started or set your mind to? And can you tell us the short story of that thing?
I can. And you know what? I'm going to jockify it. It is actually it is a jock story, and it's part of the
Do it.
reason. It's part of the reason why I'm a bad investor.
Okay.
Because I think about this a lot. You know, I'm getting on now. I'm 44, and I think about this a lot. I had a lot of things come very easy to me, and I had incredibly supportive parents. I had fantastic schooling, fantastic upbringing, a lot of positive quality people around me a lot of the time. So there wasn't a lot that sort of went wrong and gave me a hard time about going wrong. And then in my sporting career, very similar. I was blessed with talent, but amazing players around me and amazing coaches, and sort of right time, right place, and a million different things like that. So I had one huge setback in rugby, which was I had to come back from an injury and make it into a team. And that was the first time I actually sort of walked alone, go and sit under a tree, if you want to talk about this sort of self-reflection like that, and say, okay, do I really want this, and am I prepared to work hard for this? And I was, and I did, and that was coming back to professional sport after having 3 years out, having to literally physically change my body from a BMI which was out of kilter with what the other players were, a body which hadn't done real strength or speed training for sort of 3 and a bit years, and put real time and effort over a period of about 5.5 months to make it back into professional sport. And that was the first time I realized that stuff that had come easy to me actually was quite genuinely a day-to-day struggle for a lot of people. And it became a day-to-day struggle for me because of the change in sort of I suppose just body type and muscle strength and even sort of mental strength to keep yourself training in that. I worked with some great coaches and some great people, but I had to do probably 95% of it on my own. And it was a turning point in my life, not so much in my career. I was very lucky to then with that team go and play in a Super Rugby season and then onto a World Cup. But it was more about, okay, when you take on big projects like this, there needs to be an nth degree of focus. There needs to be an nth degree of commitment, and there needs to be a plan and a roadmap, and you need to be able to put milestones and grow. There's what had happened was I'd sort of, it's a bit like your annoying friend. I didn't have it in all my sports, but your annoying friend, you can pick up a golf club or a tennis racket or a squash racket or a mountain bike and just hair off, and they're like seriously good at it. And
I hate those people.
Exactly. And I was very lucky. I had it in rugby and particularly in the type of rugby I played with the good quality people around me. But it hadn't given me the lessons that I probably needed to work hard for stuff. And it's funny when a lesson like that comes along, you learn it and you learn it properly.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I like that was actually about sport, because I'm curious. I've been curious about this idea of muscle memory, and the things that we teach ourselves are the things that we relearn. And that's not necessarily about physical muscle memory for you as a sports person. And you're saying you had to retrain your body. I'm more interested in the muscle memory of, you were a pro athlete, you got injured, you kind of have been there before. Did it make it easier to get back into it, more accessible, because you knew what it was like to be at that level? And I'm thinking more here around an entrepreneur who succeeds once is more likely to succeed again. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think you can definitely draw parallels. I mean, I would say, of course it is, but I also think there are a few caveats there. As you get older, your body on the sports side, you're not physically able to do the same thing. So you can't just pick up power and speed as quickly as you can in your 30s as you can in your 20s. Little things like that. I think with the entrepreneurial journey, what I have learned is that as long as you learn those lessons, and there's the mental side to that, I don't think commitment's a problem. I don't think knowledge is a problem. But then maybe the negative of that is you get into your rut. It's like, I do SaaS businesses, and therefore, B2B specialization is my thing, so B2C businesses don't work, or whatever it is. You might find you're missing out on opportunity because you're more in the rut of what you've learned. And I follow a lot of guys on social media just for the insights of that, like the Paul Grahams and the people who have done successful investment after successful investment, Rule of Water. We've seen lots of them. They always talk about still being open, still being curious. That's why I like the premise of your first series, because even as a second time, third time, fourth time, fifth time investor, they display the same early traits, maybe just with a bit more maturity around the investment.
Yeah, I think that word maturity is also an interesting one. And yeah, you said it in your intro, you're getting on at 44. And it's funny, most people don't realize that statistically more millionaires are minted in the world after the age of 40 than before. And I think that has to do with experience and maturity, because you can see the wood from the trees slightly better. And you're not like herring ahead, even with sports, right? When you're a 19, 20-year-old Springbok, you're playing significantly harder rugby than when you're a 29, 30-year-old Springbok, because you've got the smarts and the experience on the field. I think you can maybe speak to that a bit more.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it's silly. And we've spoken about this before. One of my favorite authors is Richard Koch, who put the Pareto Principle on the map and called it the 80-20 principle, and has created an investment philosophy around it, which I really admire. And he lives it. He absolutely lives it on a day-to-day basis. And I've been lucky enough to meet him and collaborate with him on a few things. But he talks about those smarts. He's like, I tell people about the 80-20 and they're like, oh yeah, that's really cool for like 40% of my life. And he's like, you've missed the whole the whole point.
That's great.
And he lives it like you won't believe. And I think that is, it's maybe that mashup of philosophy, but then also your implementation of that philosophy. You get a lot of people who talk a good game, but then we only invest like this, except for this time where I'm doing it with my family, or I always protect capital in what I'm doing. And then you get the guy he hasn't looked after any of his cash. Come COVID, he's letting go of all the domestics and all the fringe stuff in his life, and relooking it.
Yeah, absolutely. So jumping back to the 3-year break and the hardship you mentioned earlier, I want to dive in a little bit to the idea of failure. It's what my first book was about. It's what I focus on very heavily. A lot of the people I coach and mentor, their number one concern is, oh my God, what if I fail? So how did you deal with that? I mean, the mental side of it is, at this point for me, much more intense than the physical. Physical, you can go to gym, you can train, your body heals, but mentally you can be broken forever. So like when you've injured, you're at the peak of your career, you break down, how do you get back up? Like, how do you cope with that failure? What did you actually do?
I think, it's a tremendous exploration, and I think it's very brave to talk about it, because you're so right. So many people don't like it. I think there's a combination. There's sort of 2 or 3 things that I've learned as I've got older, which I think maybe I was applying without thinking. Maybe there was a sort of intrinsic something I got from my mum or my dad, who were very positive people, or we settled in South Africa after leaving what had become Zimbabwe. At my age now, my dad had just finished fighting in a war, and he had to go and provide
Wow.
for kids. He was a qualified doctor, but started again, and my mum was by his side, and they were shot at in a convoy in Zimbabwe. So sort of, I think by the time I came along, and 9 or 10 or 11 years old, they'd worked hard enough to put me through a great school, etc., and had this great attitude. I just inherited a lot of it from them. We weren't ever the wealthiest people at the schools I was at, but we were certainly close to the happiest. And we traveled a lot and spent a lot of time together as a family. So I must thank them for that. But then also I've got to thank them for the naivety, because I also probably launched too many stupid things. I did a charity because I felt that it was a nice thing to do, to give back, without even understanding what did that mean. Do you do a charity as a one-off? Is it an event? Do you do it for 50 years? What I should have done is joined a charity of someone who'd been going for 50 years or whatever, and said, how can I help? Here we go, I'll roll up the sleeves and I'll do my stuff, and potentially given so much more than actually trying to rejig the whole future. So what if I fail wasn't really a question for me. I think maybe now, where I've got more responsibility and some kids and my own school fees, normal ones, not business ones, to actually pay. I suppose a bit of both. I've still got the business ones to pay, but I'm probably more reticent to make a big move without research, but I'm probably more willing to make a big move with research. So I think there's definitely an advancement. I'm comfortable that I've now learned to pick the people who I want to work with quite quickly, and when you can back a team and you're loyal to each other, I would definitely be less scared of failing, if you know what I mean, because then it's collaborative, and then you're in. I think then you're on the right track.
Yeah, absolutely. And something you said, kind of less fearful or more fearful, it makes me think about the idea of risk. And it's not something I prepped you on, but the idea of risk is an interesting one to me, because everyone believes that entrepreneurs are completely on top of all the risk in the world. But actually, the idea is calculated risk, not fearlessness. Like, you're not stupidly diving in and going, oh, fuck, who cares if I fail? You're saying, if I fail, the cost benefit analysis is in my favor, so screw it, I'm going to go forward. And I think that's kind of part of this learning about failure, is the more you admit that it exists, the more comfortable you get with the risks involved.
I think that's a point well made. I also think that it's also how you see things. There's different groups of people, and I think you can broadly categorize entrepreneurial types into 2. And I mean, that's a big sweeping statement, but bear with me for a while. I think there's the people who are experiencing imposter syndrome, and they're going, shit, I don't really get all of this, but I'm just going to sort of wing it, okay? and there's the people who actually have been completely sideswiped by imposter syndrome, and they don't get really all of it, but they think they get really all of it. Do you know what I mean? Because if you have to
100%.
generally go drill down into every part of every entrepreneur's life, there is no ways that there are people who've got 100% of their shit together.
No, and if they do, they're lying.
But that's
straight up lying.
I would rather deal with a person who goes, hey, listen, I'm going to make it look like I've got everything together, but I'm going to be quite honest about the stuff I'm not so on top of, and I'm going to roll with it. I'm going to be aware of my flaws. I'm going to be unconfident if I don't know the risks. I'm going to, you know what I mean? As the other person who is actually going, we've got this. We're okay. Don't worry. We're going to, we're going to sort of create a solution for whatever problem our little startup has, that they've generated a problem and then they've got other people's money and now they're super confident. I'm terrified of that person, but I'm actually quite happy to be in a room with a person who goes, listen, shit, why are we pitching to these guys that probably don't fit? The guy, they said, just hang on, we know our stuff about our business. Let's wing it on why we fit their investment philosophy a little bit and craft something on the way out of this, as opposed to kick them out the room because they don't think you're sort of perfect for them. So what I'm trying to say is that we're all quite similar. It's just that some of us are maybe believing our own rubbish, and some of us, what I quite like is some of us are saying, oh, this is a bit tough. I didn't realize that it was hard to do, but what, I'm going to carry on. I'm going to go. I've assessed the risk. I'm going to carry on.
100%. I mean, Paul Graham says it about the Y Combinator of startups, that he's never worried about the ones who over communicate. He's always worried about the ones who stop talking to him.
Well,
the ones who are saying to him, Paul, we got a problem. Paul, we're trying to fix it. Paul, we don't know where the money is. Paul, we're losing money. Those guys, he's like, no problem. They're on top of the shit. It's the ones who shut up and go, we're fine. We're fine. We're fine, until they're not fine.
That's so aligned to what I'm trying to say. It's like, I don't want to invest further in the guy who says nothing for 2 weeks and it says, oh, look, our marketing director left. We had a clash about something, but it's all cool. I'm like,
and by the way, I need an extra £1 million.
You get the letter that your marketing director has left. I'm the guy that you tell first. Or is going 100%, to leave before they leave. I want to know. 100%. And I think that actually sums up those two character types.
100%. Okay, so this you might have answered. So if you have, I don't mind if we skip it. But have you ever, out of the fear of failure or fearful of something, have you ever not done something? So you're about to start a business, about to invest in something, and actually gone, oh crap, I'm too scared, or this isn't going to work, and pulled out. If you can, I'd love to hear about that.
Well, this one might hit home a bit. This was not out of fear. This was not investing in your business.
Sure.
We had I mean, you allocated some a small percentage for me, and I had literally the move to the UK come clear and present, and I had to choose one or the other. And my concern was that I couldn't get involved with you into what was an online venture, possibly going into retail, a brand build, a whole bunch of very smart things if I was remote on this side of the world. The other businesses that I'd invested in, I had teams in place, or I had Knife Capital there. That was me direct. So yes, fear of failure there wasn't so much not backing, was never not backing you, and we went through that. But that was like, I'm not there when the letter comes, the marketing director letter comes, or whatever it is. And absolutely, I've 100%. I've had to say no on a few investments that I would have loved to have gone ahead with, but probably because I didn't know where the follow-on money was going to come. So again, not necessarily fear of failure, fear of either sort of reasonable success, and I couldn't then follow the money myself, so I would have diluted myself out of contention. And that was an international investment over here in sport and startup league in the US. But the rest of the time, I think, because I've been part of either a group of people investing, it's either been a collective yes or a collective no. So it's not necessarily been a fear thing. So I can drill it down to probably those two, and maybe one other with like a property investment or something like that, where I was just scared of the bond getting out of control and kilter with repayments and stuff.
Okay, interesting. That does make me think of something I'm kind of hammering home this year as a theme for myself and anyone who will listen, is that it's more important at the moment for me to be saying no than to be saying yes. That I'm very set on just pushing things away. I spent my 20s saying yes to everything, and that just made me confused and overwhelmed. So what's your version? I mean, are you a yes person or a no person? Where do you default to?
I think, look, it's a great philosophy there, in, saying no more often. I don't want to be seen as someone who hides behind that. I want a reason for the no. And it's okay if the reason for the no is, look, I'm too overwhelmed. That's also okay. But I think I also think that I've sort of taken on board a position this year on the future. I think maybe COVID has made me start to think a little bit more about, what does the future look like, and then reading some of the guys that I've really enjoyed, sort of from Tim Ferriss and a couple of the, what do you call them, sort of modern day philosopher come investors come sort of broadcaster,
like Naval Ravikant.
A lot of guys who do a lot of talking after a lot of thinking, if you know what I mean. And I've come to believe that the future is not always going to provide the reassurance that you seek from it. The future is actually just a little bit like what you feel right now, just in a few months' time or a few years' time. And everybody, I think, thinks once we get down this road of a raise, an investment, raising a fund, opening a business, starting a business, doing something different, then it'll be all cool, and we'll just have this big, white picket fence, and we'll sit there and do the day to day. But I actually think the future, from my vantage point right now, is going to look very similar to what's happening today. There's the new future is going to be a couple of months ahead of that, and it's going to carry on, and it's okay. I think that's okay. So therefore, don't panic so much about having to do something. And if that's a reason for the no, like you're talking about, that's okay. It's like the future's there. Maybe you're not making enough money for the big car and the huge house and the whatever right now. But if you think you're on the right track, that's okay. You can leave the car and the house for a while, because you're going to get there. And if when you get there, then you actually need it, then talk again. But it's not like, oh my God, I just need to get out of here, because there I'll be okay. And I think that sort of journeyfying of here to the future, I think if you can get hold of that, then you make clever no decisions, but you also make clever yes decisions.
100%. It's such a difficult thing, and there's two quotes that come to mind. The one was Jeff Bezos has famously said, "People often ask me what's going to change in the next 10 years, but I'm more interested in what's not going to change in the next 10 years." And that's fundamentally true for me. You can't predict 10 years ahead. No one can, and if they can, they're lying. But rather play on the field that you have.
I think it's very freeing to sort of grasp it mentally that no amount of worrying or fretting or whatever is going to change that. You can sit here and wring your hands and go, oh, I need to change, but changing it will change it. Worrying about changing it will not change it.
Yeah, worry about the things you can control. The second quote was, "Wherever you go, there you are." And the truth is, no matter what you choose to say yes to, if you're saying yes to everything, you're still in the middle of all these things you've said yes to. And we'll talk about the definition of success just now, but I'm still shocked. And the more I talk to people, the more I'm shocked by this, that so few people have defined what success triggers are in their lives. What does success look like for you? Is it the big car? Is it the big house? Is it the big client? Is it $1 million business? What is it? And if you don't know, how do you know what to say yes and no to?
Well, I mean, you're so right. It's funny, as I move on, it's actually not that. It's not the big car and the big house. And although I do see a lot of people pretty excited about that kind of stuff, but I've got 4 little kids, and a fantastic wife and family. Our family life is very important to us. And literally, the older I get, the more I realize that success actually for me is good custodianship of that. So my role in that, and of course, a huge portion of that is business and making those right decisions, and a huge portion of that is being there for my son if he makes sporting or non-sporting decisions, or my daughter, and that sort of growth as a family is probably what will determine success for me. But a huge part of that is then the fact that I'm making the right decisions in work, and what I do, and who I work for, and who I work with, and who I'm committed to, and that's where I'm trying to sort of move myself forward in terms of understanding my own happiness on that. And I think I've got closer to defining it. I'm very happy when I belong, when I'm part of something. I'm good at making others feel they belong, because I work well with people. And it is a skill, but it's difficult, because you don't belong to everything. I mean, South Africa famously is a country where it's full of outsiders. A black guy in a white environment, a white guy in a black environment, English and Afrikaans, Afrikaans and English, foreigner. We've got these constant juxtapositions. People who are outsiders in what they do, and being a sportsman in business, I'm probably an outsider forever. I'm a very, very small fraction of percentage of people who've are doing a role where I wasn't trained to do this. I've got you by hook or by crook. So that's difficult to then start to put together what is my path to happiness then, because am I trying to push it for my belonging? Am I trying to push it for the benefit of what I'm doing? But I also think I'm learning a little bit more about myself and triggers in others. We get brought up with quite a quasi-religious look at everything, where the selfless giving of everything you have for other people is like this ideal, this sort of thing to look up at, and I'm starting to understand that selflessness, complete selflessness, is actually overrated. And it's non-existent.
And non-existent. 100%. There's no such thing as selflessness. 100%. Altruism is a lie.
Women especially, and we've had a huge outcry of the treatment of women in the workplace, and it comes from particularly in the home environment. Daughters, mothers are trained to sort of be quiet and subservient, etc. And I think that it's societal as part of that problem. A lot of them then will have now fought that and come out and are incredible in a lot of roles. But you imagine, you get 15, 20 years of no, you do the washing up and cooking and stuff, and then you've got to change so much to come out of it.
And in South Africa, it's just so bad. Like the gender-based violence is just so brutal, and men just aren't taking their role seriously. Yeah.
I think, and I don't want to get too deep on that, but I'm saying society is to blame, not necessarily sort of to point fingers, and it's not the purpose of society to undermine people. It's just evolved like that. But I talk about the selflessness. I think there's got to be a bit of look after yourself and your bit, and then slowly things will be okay, because the guy next to you will look after himself, and the girl next to him will look after herself, and joint and severally we look after the needs of the business or the needs of our current endeavor, etc. As opposed to, don't worry guys, you're all starting a business. I've currently got income from sport, and talking real example, I'll pay the salaries, and then we'll definitely get there, and we'll just nail this. And everybody goes, great idea, thanks. And a year later they go, hey, I've got a side project which I'm leaving to go and manage.
Yeah,
and
I'm out.
Thanks for the ride. And you sort of, so I'm now trying to teach younger guys. I'm saying, if you're doing a startup, this is not like give. I got told by a very good friend of mine that his mentor pulled him aside one day and said, hey, buddy, if you want to survive in this world, give to the givers. Don't give to the takers. Give to the takers, you'll never get it back. If you give to the givers, you'll get it back your whole life long. And that's what I mean. When I'm talking about selflessness is overrated, I'm not talking about
that.
Hey, just look after yourself. I'm saying look after the people who are going to make sure they look after you.
100%. There's so much to unpack there. I've made a few notes. The first thing, I've started to tell young entrepreneurs that self-care is not selfish.
Absolutely.
That it's okay to put yourself at the top of your priority list. Yeah. And there's a difference, right? And when you're younger, you mistake that I'm looking after myself, so therefore I'm being selfish. And actually, no, the older you get, the more you realize, the more you sleep, the healthier you eat, the more you train, you're preserving your mental capacity. So I fully agree with that. The other thing I want to observe is I've genuinely never heard or thought of it this way because my world doesn't operate like this. You said you find yourself happiest when you belong. And for me, it's the complete opposite. I find myself happiest when I'm disrupting belonging and disrupting the norm, when I'm poking at it to see what's new. And so that was just an interesting thing for me. I'm sure some of my listeners and audience, like I've never thought of belonging as a happy place. And I'm sure some of my listeners have never thought as not belonging being a happy place. It's just so interesting how different people are fed.
I've got a piece of that which I'll share with you as we go forward, and not for too much now, but I've worked closely with a guy, a New Zealand guy, who's writing a book on the concept of belonging and the fact that it's actually neurologically programmed into the human race. Remember, you talking about pushing and prodding and not belonging. You still belong to the pushers and prodders. Yeah. So I'm not
Absolutely.
I'm not
Absolutely.
disagreeing
Yeah.
with you and saying like people who are individuals.
No, I know what you mean. Yeah.
A complete individual is also a tribe in and of themselves. You know what I mean? So you belong to a different type of person, and the Stoics are exactly the same. You know, but he's actually working with an Oxford professor, Professor Dunbar, who did the law of 150. You know, once you get to 150 people in a working group, a factory, you need to split it up. You need to go to 275s until they get to 150 each, and then 475s until, and so on and so forth. And they're writing a book around it using some analogous interviews with sportsmen and women, businesses, etc., and talking about the concept of belonging as part of motivation, but also the neurological programming which helps successful people use it to their advantage. So hasn't come out yet. All the data and stuff's been gathered, and I've seen some of the early drafts, and it's very powerful work.
It's very poignant at this point too, especially when we're all segregated and locked down and distant from one another. That feeling of belonging, we are all missing it because it's just not present anymore, which is, it's interesting. Okay, so next question is, I'm curious, when you start or invest in something, what's more important to you, the detail or the big picture?
I'll say immediately big picture, because I'm not the most financial of our group, and I work very closely with our financial team to try and upskill myself on runway, run rate, affordability, growth, scalability, all those kind of things, and the financial model is a huge part of that. But I've also learned with some of the co-investors that we've worked with, and lucky to work with some very smart people. It's about big picture. It's about, but it's not like big picture, there it is, there's the big world. It's like, where does this investment fit in the big picture as we know it, as we think it's going to happen? What is it disrupting? What is it changing? What is it not disrupting or changing and benefiting from, etc. So I would put myself in the latter category for that, but only because I'm well backed up by some proper detailed people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is so key, is that you can't only be big picture as an entrepreneur. You have to also go, I want to change the world, and this is practically the first step. Otherwise, what's the point?
Well, there's so many
examples.
There's so many examples. So what I've tried to pick up over the years is little examples of the crossover. So we've got a real financial detail-based CEO, Evan van Heerden, and his reputation is Mr. No, because you can't get an investment past him, but he's got an incredible record. So when you do get it past him, you've got a proper advocate and a proper sort of supporter. And he talks about little moments in his career where he realized that he was thinking big picture, but he was looking for the detail of that big picture. One of them was an investment that went in payments in Africa, but he was like, but people are going to get the smartphone or whatever it is, but when are they going to be using it? The batteries are dying out. How does it work? And he was in Malawi, I think, and at a little village, they got they got an airplane in, and then a taxi to a little village where they had to turn off, and they were staying at a lodge or something like that. And there was literally a box next to the electricity box came into the village and then went out to the various points. And on top of that box was a tray with like 50 cell phones, and they'd been literally, put together. And a charging station had been
Like
hacked out of
hacked
nothing.
charging
And it was like,
options.
if that has happened that quickly here, then those phones are going to be charged and fine in people's hands in the most remote parts of Africa. And that was his little detail into big picture moment.
Amazing.
And they made the investment.
Wow, amazing. So, I mean, on that point, actually, it's an interesting segue that from the outside, when you start something, it always looks simple. And I think South Africans, when it comes to rugby, are quite guilty of this. We shit on the Springboks when they do something badly because we think it's so easy to be a Springbok because there've been so many Springboks before them. And it's the same with business, right? From the outside, the version that comes into my head is Angry Birds. They hit the world, exploded. It was this huge success, but nobody knows that that was their last attempt at a game. They'd been building games for 8 years. They had failed every single time. And if Angry Birds didn't hit in the App Store, they were going bust. So my question to you is, what challenges have you faced that people wouldn't know about when you started? And you can pick whatever you want to start, but I think maybe joining Knife Cap, it's not easy moving country, starting a VC firm, finding investments, managing it, hitting it. So like, what would people not know?
Because those are the usually ones you bury and you don't want people to know about. But I also think, yeah, exactly. I also
not on this podcast.
They're the ones that you and other people learn the most from. So I think in context,
absolutely.
The fun one here. So I joined a family office who've been particularly successful in private equity and M&A. And I joined with the premise that there was a little pot of gold at the bottom of the rainbow of VC if we got Knife Capital right. And I've had to push water up a slope with a pin for a long time, never having to convince the team. But remember, a lot of VC firms are not. They're not the entrepreneurs themselves. So they work with entrepreneurs. They're very good at it, but they might come from a financial background, very good at DD, very good at marketing. And we've got all of those skill sets across our firm. But it was the no, or the difficulties was actually trying to prove the value of the little investment, because as everybody says, it doesn't move the dial. It's not £100 million investment. It's like, you find me a £100 million VC investment in South Africa, I promise you, I'll be begging for a job. I'll be at your front door.
That's what the 2.2 billion rand exit. It just doesn't exist.
Goldman Ventures. Everybody here in the UK thinks Africa's too small, and I'm going, guys, you're missing the whole point. And our firm have now started to believe, and with our launch of our Africa sort of Series B fund, we're getting more people to believe, and that's been the longest, hardest slog. And we had a raise this year. You might have seen a company called Data Profit. We haven't exited. We've gone on to the next phase of investment, and we've got partners who've come in from international. And now suddenly I think people are going, okay, you've been telling us the story for 5 years. Now we're listening, because now it's starting to move. So that's been really hard, and it's still hard. But I think we are, what do you call it? The sort of little engine that thought it could, which is the VC space in South Africa, is starting to get the traction that it needs. COVID hasn't helped, but I think that's probably put paid to the world just going off the edge of a cliff in 5 years anyway. I think it's actually made people tighten up and look for returns in different places, and maybe benefited us in the long term. I hope so. I think we've got a lot to give the world in terms of ideas, entrepreneurs, stickability, sort of a hybrid vigor, which is very entrepreneurial in its nature. We get naturally in South and Southern Africa, just from how you grow up. So I think there's a lot to come, but it's been difficult to keep punching that. People are like, yes, good idea. We don't do investments into funds, but tell us when you've got a unicorn, and we'll definitely come along. I'm like, you're killing me,
Oh, yeah. But now, Bob, just imagine that from the entrepreneur's perspective. Almost 10 years now, I was raising money for one of my businesses, went to London, Germany, New York, Texas, all over. And without fail, all of them said, we love your business. Just move your headquarters over to where we are, and then we'll go. And I was like, no, but you don't understand. The opportunity isn't in New York. It's in Africa. It's where I am. And I mean, that was 12 years ago. I mean, even Silicon Cape, when it started all that many years ago, we're still fighting that battle of there are big South African businesses to invest in. But you're right. The truth is, the worse our rand gets, the less impressive our exits look. And then it's hard to justify for the investment. And that's a very oversimplified problem, but that is the problem.
It is one of the big problems.
Foreign money doesn't want to come in.
There's myriad problems. I mean, I think we've got a huge
yes, there are
understanding misalignment with IP. People are like, hey, love this entrepreneur, love this idea, but I'm not investing in Johannesburg. What did someone say to me? Said, hey, love Africa, it's all we do, but I don't travel further south than San Jose. And I'm sitting in the middle of San Francisco. I'm going, wow, if I could record this, you'd not feel proud of yourself.
Yeah. Then you don't love Africa. You don't know the investment climate there. If you don't leave San Jose,
African, you wouldn't feel very proud of yourself. I'll put you up on the screen. But look, I mean, I think that's where we've specialized. We've been able to exit businesses internationally. And that's why I got on board with Knife Capital. That's why I joined, I believe, in South and Southern Africa with all my heart. But I also believe that economically, dollars and pounds and euros are worth more than the rand. So like, it's actually a perfect nexus for me. I'm excited about investing. It's still every day you got to be telling the story, telling other people why it works like that. So look, of course, it's nice that your difficulty of no's is also a 12-year journey. Mine's a long journey, but it's what I get up in the morning for. I sell Africa and the concept of Africa. The beauty about selling Africa and South Africa in particular is that scales from the eyes experience when you take someone there for the very first time lives with you forever. It's like, it's like taking a kid to the sea when they, they take their nappy off and they run into the ocean. It's like, oh my God, I didn't realize there was something as cool as this out there,
It's so funny you say that, Bob. My first experience of the ocean was the literal opposite of that. My parents put me down. I touched the water, turned around, and bolted away from it. Never returned. I was a proper Santon boy.
From landlocked Zimbabwe, and when I saw the sea, I felt the kinship.
Fantastic. So I'm interested from your perspective as someone investing in entrepreneurs and someone who is an entrepreneur and a sports person. What do you think of the concept of work-life balance?
I've read a lot about it recently, and I know Time Magazine had a huge thing on it. Microsoft and The Economist did something this week. I think Microsoft have said it across the UK. There's no focus on anyone returning to the office till 2021. I'll get the dates wrong probably, but I mean, that was arresting, for me. I was like, wow. But then, you know what? They're part of the 17 biggest stock upticks over the last 9 months. So maybe there's a mix there in this work-life balance. I've had a lot of guys talking to me about saying it's the problem with home office and home work is that there's less balance that way than if I'm always at work, but home is my sanctuary. And I found that interesting because they're like, you go for a call, you're a bit disappointed, and then your kid says, please come and throw the frisbee, and you go, I can't, I've got to do the next call. So you're disappointed in the call, disappointed in not throwing the frisbee, two disappointed people in the room. And I think that more is about, we said at the very beginning, more about the plan. If you're going to work from home or work less from the office, those are two different journeys. I think you can also say, okay, cool. I am going to go to the office on a Wednesday or whatever, and that's my cool down day. And maybe that day you go for a long lunch or a long walk or and you sort of have your back to the selflessness argument. You have a bit of your own time, because I do feel, especially now, I mean, the UK is not like SA with lovely big gardens and houses that have got extra spare rooms and offices, etc. We, in my little house, I share a working study with my wife, and if she's also got work to do, then I've got to deal with it, and you move onto your phone for a call or whatever it is. So it's less easy to take a break. But I think going back to the original question, what I think of it, I absolutely believe you have to have it. But then I also believe in a lot of the entrepreneurial wisdom that says if you're doing something that you love, you're not going to be suffering at work. So then you're going to be happier at home as well. So I don't have an answer for you that says number of hours or a plan like that. I've got an answer like, if you're philosophically okay with it, to make your own sort of cobbled together answer for that, I think you're in a better place than someone who's just being dictated to.
Yeah. Agreed. And I think it is about taking the time to think about what it is you want out of work and life. So two things on that. The one is my favorite quote that I have told people from my own experience in lockdown is, the worst thing about lockdown for me is I get into bed and look at my desk every night. And Bob, I'll show you and everyone watching, I'm not actually kidding. There is my bed. I literally get into bed and stare at my desk every day. And that's killer. That's not work-life balance. That is being forced to work where you live because of a lockdown. And people need to remember that difference. The second thing is this phrase that I've coined called sacrifice fallacy. The idea that you have to give up your mental and physical well-being to build something of worth. And I think that in your early 20s, that's what you believe. You believe that because you're invincible, you can work 20-hour days, not sleep, not eat, not train, and build $1 billion business and be happy when you're 40. The truth is, almost no one builds $1 billion business. You all kill yourselves to build these businesses, and then you've sacrificed your mental and physical fitness to do this, and you're no better off. So I'm trying to launch this slow hustle movement. Hustle, but do it slowly.
That's why I mentioned
be patient,
that
be consistent.
Never going to provide the reassurance you're looking for. The future should be 6 months from now doing what 100%. You're doing right now a little bit better.
100%. Incremental improvements. 1% every day compounds over time. So tell me something that you wish someone had told you when you were just starting out this journey.
I've got so many. I've got to try and find one that's good for the environment now. No.
Give me more. Give me more than one.
I definitely would have really appreciated someone being able to demonstrate to me the absolute power of focus. But not, not like you must really try and focus. Like, okay, cool. Let's look at one part of your life and let's create the opportunity for you to focus on that part of your life, and then measure it in 3 months' time, and not focus on the other parts, but allow them to carry on. So do your current non-focus stuff there, but then if you're doing, a project or you're doing your focus, let's do that differently to what we do the other stuff, and then let's look at the difference. And then when that has markedly moved ahead of the others, that then let's assess what we need to focus in the broad and what
I love that, but I do want to ask you a little bit of I don't want to put you on the spot here, but surely you learned that lesson early on in your career when you focused everything you had on being a rugby player. The rest of your life still carried on, and look what happened, right? World Cup captain just from focus.
No, I didn't, Nick. I love
interesting.
I love sports. Like I said, I don't want to jockify it, but I do. I love sports. I play competitive cricket at the Weybridge Cricket Club. I don't need to, but I'll sprint around the field diving. I mean, I've got flipping bruises on my elbows and my knees. Like my
we're different people, you and me, Bob.
What are you doing that for? I'm like, the joy that I get of eventually chasing down
just
a
you're
cricket
old
ball
now.
or playing touch rugby I play football 3 times a week. So I get
Yeah.
huge joy from sport, but I never focused enough on sport, on rugby. I never.
So is it more your natural talent that has like led you there, and then you just fostered that natural talent,
Yes,
but you didn't focus all your energy on
that's the
being a
giant copper.
Springbok? You
Is
were just good
is
at it,
that
so that's where you went.
I then thought
Wow.
that's how you achieve.
Hmm.
That's why I was trying to say.
That's a brilliant revelation.
You said what would you maybe not do? I was like, well, if everything in life is like how I've been brought up and how Rugger's treated me, I can do anything. And that ends up
Wow.
100%.
And then the world is like, fuck you, buddy. That's
then you
not how the
learn
world
that
works.
at 40, and now I'm 4 years into the journey, and I've got mates who at 18 failed or whatever, 20 failed their first CFA exam. And oh shit, this is actually a big bad world. And now he's the lead auditing partner of the second biggest auditing firm in the world, because he decided to go, okay, well, I actually am good at it. I'm just going to work a bit harder.
Yeah.
But
and this is what failure feels like, and this is how hard you have to work to overcome it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
that's such a great insight.
That for me, if someone had been able to physically demonstrate that, and I will try and physically demonstrate that with my kids and my, not to the detriment of
I was
other
about
things,
to ask you that.
to have the other things, but I genuinely believe that there is a place for huge and intense focus in an area that you love and enjoy, and you'll get. Yeah.
And I think that's the key. My final statement before I ask you your last question is that's the key thing is don't let the world happen to you. You have agency. You get to choose what you like. You get to choose what you fail at. I think it was Jim Carrey who said, the chances are you're going to fail at something you don't love. So you may as well do something you do love. And just blows my brain, like that sort of thinking. You have agency. The amount of people who just happen to be where they are because that's where they ended up is nuts to me. So about the final thing I ask all my guests is, please tell us where we can find you, what you're interested in hearing from our readers and listeners and viewers. If you want to hear from startups or founders, just tell anyone where they can get hold of you.
Very easy to find me on LinkedIn. I usually accept most requests there. I'm most active on Twitter. I'm not so good on Instagram, but Twitter for me is a cathartic sort of reading of other people's stories, etc. My Twitter handle is @BobSkinstad. Otherwise, quite easy to go to our Knife Capital website, which is knifecap.com, www.knifecap.com, and I'm available there. You do the maths on Bob at that email address. It's not too hard to forget. And I love hearing from people, businesses that are looking for funding, people are looking for advice, collaborative thinkers in the space. For me, growing that network of people I can help and who can help me is always positive. And that's why I also want to say thank you for the reach out. It's been really cool to discuss all this stuff and to see you again. And I know we'll chat again soon.
Absolutely, my pleasure, Bob. Thank you for your time, and good luck.